Welcome to Draft Day edition of Vikings Latest. I'm your host, Cole Smith, and today we're going to be talking about the first round, second round, third round, how the Vikings need to start hitting on these picks they have for the top 97 picks, and how the roster has not really hit on many of those kinds of picks in the past, and how they need to construct the roster moving forward to become a more consistent playoff contender and hopefully eventually break through, return to the Super Bowl for the first time in 5 decades. So let's get started with a piece from Alec Lewis of The Athletic that he put out yesterday, talking about the Vikings' lack of hits on day two and the early part of day three, and how it's affected the Vikings roster through the years. So right now, Lewis highlighted that the Vikings have 61 players on the roster. Six of them are from the second, third, and fourth rounds, and that is the lowest in the NFL by almost 10 players. So Vikings haven't had a lot of these players in recent years. They had three second round picks in the 2022 draft with Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, his first draft, and struck out on all three of them. Andrew Booth Jr., Ed Ingram, and Brian Asamoah struck out on all of them, and that left the Vikings with long-term holes at each of those positions. So since then, the Vikings have actually been moving on from a lot of their top 100 picks. So haven't had many opportunities to take advantage and pick those players. And as a whole, that's let the Vikings kind of go to undrafted free agency to not only sign players for depth, but also to actually rely on those players to end up being starters down the line. So that leads to lack of explosiveness across the board, not as much productivity across the board, and that puts a lot of stress on the coaching staff. That makes guys like Kevin O'Connell calling plays on offense has to call the perfect play call. Brian Flores the same way. Even Brian Flores, the defense, as good as it's been the past couple of years, if you look across the board, there's not a lot of high end talent on that defense, but as a whole, it's a cohesive group that makes like a much better group than individually those players would make you think they would be. Offensively, we've seen holes on the offensive line kind of expose themselves through the years as well. So, like right now, the Vikings have 32 undrafted free agents on the roster. Seattle, they have 31. However, the Seahawks have 21 players on their roster from rounds 2 to 4. They have, that's over 3.5. That's 3.5 times as much as the Vikings have. That gives you depth along the roster, gives you starters across the roster. Doesn't make you have to go acquire a bunch of guys, spending spree in free agency to patch all these holes. You're able to build, a good foundation with those players and find talent. And the Vikings just haven't had that. Now, the Vikings only landed four starters completely through the Kwesi Adofo-Mensah era. That's including players like Jordan Addison, who was first round, and Will Reichard, who was a kicker. And I guess that kind of counts as a starter, but I don't know. Some people might argue that. So the Vikings, they've just struggled across, top to bottom in the draft the past 4 years. They need to change that this year. Alec Lewis, he talked about how Eagles GM Howie Roseman kind of laid out his blueprint for the draft earlier this week. Roseman said that when they go into the draft, he's looking for blue chip prospects in round one. Now, the Eagles are usually picking back half of the first round, so how they view a player later in the 20s as a blue chip player, I'm not sure how they do that, but he's looking for top tier players in round one. In round two, he's looking for solid starters who can be difference makers. And then after that, even rounds 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, he's looking for starters. And then he said once they get to August, that's when they'll start looking at the scrap heap, looking for depth players, backups, players like that. Not where you're drafting a backup, a guy specifically for depth in round 5, 6, 7. Roseman's trying to hit it out of the park later on. So he said even if they have 8 picks and they walk out with 3 starters out of those 8 picks, he said that's awesome. And like I said, the Vikings only have 4 starters in 4 seasons worth of draft picks. It's not going to cut it. That's how teams like the Eagles are able to win a Super Bowl in 2017, kind of fell apart after a few years, then built it right back up. They've been to the Super Bowl 3 times in the last 5 years. So, with that, we're going to go into Ben Gessling's mock draft. From the Star Tribune, he's one of the top Vikings beat reporters. Yesterday, we had Alec Lewis's 7 round mock draft from The Athletic. Kind of compare how both of them are viewing things. They're both very plugged in. Gessling's on Paul Allen's show all the time, voice of the Vikings. So he is as plugged in as anybody, as is Alec Lewis. But they do have a little bit differing opinions of where the Vikings go at on the first pick. But after that, it's like all the positions still intertwine at some point. So with that, Gessling has the Vikings going. Dylan Thieneman, safety out of Oregon, first round. This is like this. I don't even know if I'd say sexy pick at this point. This is just kind of like the pick that everybody's been giving the Vikings since the combine, when Thieneman just blew the combine out of the water with his athleticism. Gessling talks about how there's going to be a major shift at the Vikings position of safety with Harrison Smith's pending retirement. Even if he comes back, the Vikings do need to get younger at safety, and that's why that's why Gessling believes the Vikings could target Thieneman early on because of his instincts, his speed, versatility. He also has other options at 18 if Thieneman happens to go earlier at like pick 12 to Dallas. He has the Vikings potentially going after Emmanuel McNeil Warren, safety out of Toledo, or Clemson defensive tackle Peter Woods. Talks about Peter Woods having a lot of quickness and kind of some athleticism along the defensive line. The Vikings haven't addressed the interior defensive line in the draft since 2013 with Sharif Floyd, which is crazy to think about. Could this be the year? That'd be kind of crazy. Like, I like Peter Woods, but this is regarded as a pretty weak defensive tackle draft. If the Vikings were to go after Woods, that'd be them pretty much admitting like they don't really trust the rest of the depth at that position. There are other positions like safety that can be addressed later in the draft. Maybe the Vikings go Peter Woods and just say, you know what, we'll do that, and then we'll address safety and these other positions of need later on. So maybe that's part of what they do, but right now it feels like safety-ish. I still think that Kenyon Sadiq, Thieneman's teammate at Oregon at tight end, could be an option as well. That's who Alec Lewis had the Vikings taking. Um, Now, as far as how round two goes, uh, Gessling has the Vikings trading down here. I think the Vikings could be a candidate to trade down from 18, but Gessling still has the Vikings traded down here. He has the Vikings trading picks 49 and 97 with the Texans and acquiring picks 59 and 69. So you get rid of the second round or the later third round pick, and then you just move up. Get two more players in the top 69. So at pick 59, he has the Vikings taking San Diego State cornerback Chris Johnson. Chris Johnson, going into the draft process, he was kind of regarded as a late first round candidate. For whatever reason, his stock's kind of fallen a little bit through the draft process, but still second round kind of talent. Right here, the Vikings would be getting him at the end of the second round. Gessling, he talks about his speed, ran a 4.4 140, has good ball skills. He also went to San Diego State, which is Kevin O'Connell's alma mater, so maybe that makes him even more attractive to the Vikings. Vikings only had two cornerbacks play over 200 defensive snaps last season. They did add James Pierre in free agency, who has some familiarity with Brian Flores, but this gets the Vikings younger at cornerback. Position of need, in my opinion. I don't know how much Flores actually, covets or prioritizes cornerbacks, but I think they should try addressing cornerback sometime within the first 2 days of the draft. So another option here that Gessling talks about, Eli Stowers, tight end Vanderbilt. There's tight end popping up again. And then edge rusher Malachi Lawrence. He's been somebody that's been talked about quite a bit. So edge rusher, even in the event that the Vikings keep Jonathan Grenard, could get younger. Andrew Van Ginkel, he's about to hit 30. Want to start getting younger across the defensive line as a whole. So with pick 69, that second pick that the Vikings acquired from the Texans in this mock trade, Gessling has the Vikings taking Jadarian Price, backup running back at Notre Dame. He was only a backup because he was behind Jeremiah Love, who's likely going to be a top 5 pick in this draft. He talks about how Price he scored 24 touchdowns after tearing his Achilles in 2022. Very productive, good kick returner, good pass receiver. This would give the Vikings a third running back. Aaron Jones is on the wrong side of 30. Jordan Mason, as we keep talking about, he's never carried a full workload. Even though I like Jordan Mason, the team just doesn't seem to run him enough. So this would give like a third option, and then the flexibility and the potential for Price to potentially take the running back one job in 2027 and beyond. Just gets younger, another skill set at the running back position. So I'd be for something like this. I don't know if Price is going to fall to 69. I don't even know if he'd fall to 49, the Vikings' original second round pick. But if he happens to be there at 69, I think the Vikings need to absolutely jump on him. And honestly, if he's at 59, I think they could jump on him too. So other possibilities here, we see safeties show up again. Trayden Stukes, he's been a very popular name the past few weeks in draft circles. Arizona cornerback slash safety, as is Jacob Rodriguez, linebacker at Texas Tech. He's somebody who could be an option if the Vikings stick and pick at pick 49. He's one of the most productive linebackers in college football over the past several years. He had a great Senior Bowl when I was down there. That's all anybody could talk about was Jacob Rodriguez. Only things that are really kind of hindering his draft stock, he is a little smaller. I was surprised standing next to him how small he is as far as football players go. And he doesn't have like that top end elite speed, but 7 forced fumbles last year. He's all over the field at the Senior Bowl, all over the field the past couple of years in college football. Vikings could absolutely use another off-ball linebacker with Blake Cashman getting older. Ivan Pace Jr., the team doesn't seem to trust him too much. Eric Wilson, too, is on the wrong side of 30. So, and then from there, the Vikings with pick 82 in round 3, they would go Logan Jones, center out of Iowa. Iowa has been like a factory for offensive linemen under Kirk Ferentz. Logan Jones could be the next great Iowa offensive lineman. Don't know if he'd be starting right away. The team did say that they're going to have Blake Brandel move to center full time. He looked really good last year in a tough spot. He'd played guard and tackle throughout his collegiate and NFL career before last year. Injuries forced him into center. He actually played pretty well. So this would pretty much create a camp battle at center. If Logan Jones doesn't start right away, he could be ready to take over in the event that Brandel gets injured or just wins the job outright. And then should be, if you pick him at 82, you're expecting him to be the long-term answer at center. We talked about this yesterday. The Vikings, they've had success with late-round picks at center. That's included Matt Burke back in 98 and John Sullivan back in 2008. Those guys sat for a year or two before taking over the full-time role. Logan Jones, if he's a round 3 pick, you're kind of expecting him to probably start sooner than that. But if Blake Brandel holds down the fort for a year, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world either. Gessling does also talk about the other centers, K-State's Sam Hecht, Auburn's Connor Liu, Florida's Jake Slaughter as options. He also talks about Texas linebacker Anthony Hill, who I still think he's another guy that I think could be an option at pick 49. I'm not sure what Gessling's hearing. Just a lot of these guys I think could be off the board by pick 49. So if he falls 82, that'd be awesome. And then Georgia State wide receiver Ted Hurst, small school guy, but very productive, big bodied, 6'4", still ran a 4.4. He looked really good down at the Senior Bowl as well. So with that, like I said, just like a lot of the same positions kept creeping up: safety, cornerback, off-ball linebacker, center. The same positions that Alec Lewis saw the Vikings addressing in his mock draft, That's who Gessling had. If you run any PFF mock or any mock draft simulator, you're probably seeing a lot of these same players continually show up for the Vikings. I've been doing it. It's like almost every time that I do it, doesn't matter like who I prioritize at the top, same guys keep kind of falling, and the same guys kind of fall in line with the Vikings' needs: running back, tight end, offensive line, center, linebacker, cornerback, safety. It's crazy. It's not that this draft's going to be foolproof for Rob Brzezinski and the rest of the Vikings organization. I just think that there are a lot of opportunities for them to. They don't have to get stuck to one player or two players. They can have an open mind and take advantage of that, get some instant contributors, get a couple day one starters, and go from there. So we're finally here. Hopefully tomorrow we're talking about the Vikings nailing their first round pick. Be all excited about it, or maybe they trade out and pick up 2027 first round pick. We'll talk about that if that happens, but should have a new Viking by tomorrow. We'll talk all about it. Tune in here, and thank you for tuning in to Vikings Latest. Like I said, I'm your host, Cole Smith. Like, follow, subscribe. I'll see you next time.